The cake was still in my hands when my stepfather pointed at the front door and told me to get out. It was my mother's 60th birthday. I had driven 4 hours from the city with my 6-year-old son Theo asleep in the back seat the whole way, and I had baked her favorite cake myself, the lemon one with the raspberry between the layers that she used to make when I was little. I carried it up the porch steps balanced on one arm with Theo's hand in mine, and the second we walked into that crowded living room, the talking stopped. "Well," my stepfather said from his recliner, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "look who decided to grace us. The single mother." He said it the way some people say a slur. There were maybe 30 people packed into that house. My mother's church friends, my aunts, my cousins, a few neighbors. Every one of them turned to look at me and Theo standing in the doorway, and I felt my face go hot. My mother didn't even get up. She was sitting in the good armchair like a queen, and she looked me over from my shoes to my hair and shook her head. "You couldn't have at least worn a dress, Hannah. It's my birthday." "Happy birthday, Mom," I said. "I made you the lemon cake." My older sister sailed over from the kitchen before I could take another step. She had a wine glass in one hand and a diamond on the other that you could see from across the room. "Oh, Hannah, that's so sweet. Store-bought would have been fine. You didn't have to go to the trouble." She took the cake out of my hands without asking and set it on a side table behind a stack of catered desserts where nobody would ever see it. We had it all handled. My husband had the whole thing catered. You know how it is when you can actually afford to do things right. My brother-in-law lifted his beer at me from the couch. "Hannah, still driving that little hatchback? They make payment plans now, you know." A few people laughed. Theo pressed himself against my leg. "I want to tell you that I expected something better. I didn't." This was a normal interaction with my family. This was a Tuesday. But there's something about being humiliated in front of 30 people while your child holds your hand and stares up at you confused, wondering why everyone is laughing at his mom, that does something to you. It hollows you out. My aunt, the one who had always treated me like a charity case, leaned toward my mother and said in a stage whisper, "She looks tired. Are you eating, honey? You can tell us if money's tight." "I'm fine, Aunt," I said. "Really, because nobody would blame you," she went on, louder now. "Raising a child alone, no husband, working some little office job. It's a lot. There's no shame in food stamps. Here's the thing they didn't know. There was no little office job. 11 years earlier, right after my biological father died and left me almost nothing but a work table in his garage and a stubborn streak, I had started a company. It began as me sewing weighted blankets for kids with sensory issues at my kitchen table. Because Theo's cousin had autism and nothing on the market worked for him. People asked where I got it, then their friends asked, then a children's hospital asked. By the time Theo was born, I had a warehouse. By the time he was 3, I had a national contract and a line of products in 1,100 stores. The company was called Quietwater, and the previous quarter it had cleared just under $58 million in revenue. I was the founder, the CEO, and the only shareholder who mattered. My family thought I worked the front desk somewhere downtown. I had let them think it. That was my mistake, and I'll own it. When the company first took off, I tried to tell my mother. I drove down and I said, "Mom, I started a business and it's doing really well," and you know what she did? She laughed and said, "Oh, Hannah, don't get ahead of yourself. You were never the business type, that was always your sister." And something in me just closed. I decided that if they wanted me to be the failure, fine, I'd be the failure. It was easier than being doubted. So I sat there in my mother's living room on her 60th birthday in my jeans, holding my son's hand, and I took it. I took all of it. What I didn't know, sitting there, was that they had been planning something. My stepfather pushed himself up out of the recliner and clapped his hands together. "Since we're all here," he said, "family meeting. Real quick. Won't take long." My uncle stood up too, and he had a folder. An actual manila folder, like he was about to give a presentation. My stomach dropped because I recognized the look on his face. It was the look of a man who thinks he's caught somebody. "Now I don't want to ruin the party," my uncle said. "Ruining the party? But some things have come to light that this family needs to deal with. As you all know, I've been handling the household accounts for your mother and stepfather since they retired. I did not know that. but I nodded along with everyone else. And over the past 2 years, he continued, opening the folder and spreading papers across the coffee table, there have been some very strange transactions. Large deposits coming in from accounts we can't trace, and large withdrawals. He paused for effect. Tens of thousands of dollars. Disappearing. The room went dead silent. Even the kids stopped. My uncle looked right at me. Hannah, you're the only one in this family with access to your mother's online banking. We set it up that way years ago so you could help her, since you're so good with computers. So I have to ask, where's the money going? I felt the blood leave my face, because I knew exactly what those transactions were. The deposits coming in from untraceable accounts were mine. For 2 years, I had been quietly putting money into my mother's account. 10,000 a month, and I'd routed it through a holding company so she'd never know it was me. She thought her pension and my stepfather's social security were stretching further than they had any right to. They weren't. I was paying their mortgage. I was paying their property taxes. I had paid for the catered food sitting on that table indirectly, by keeping them solvent enough to spend their actual money on a party. The withdrawals he was so suspicious about, those were them, spending it. I think, my uncle said slowly, Hannah has been stealing from her own mother. The room exploded. My mother put her hand to her chest. My sister gasped like she'd been rehearsing it. My aunt started saying I knew it. I knew something was wrong to anyone who would listen. My stepfather's face went red, and he started yelling about how he always knew I was a leech, how he'd taken me in when my real father couldn't be bothered, how this was the thanks he got. And Theo, my son, who was 6 years old and did not understand any of it, tugged on my sleeve and said, "Mommy, why is everyone yelling at you?" I knelt down to him. My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice steady. "It's okay, baby. The grown-ups are confused about something." "Confused," my sister repeated with a nasty little laugh. "That's one word for it. Hannah, just admit it. We all know you've been struggling. Nobody's going to throw you in jail. Just give the money back and we can move past this." I stood up. I had a choice in that moment, and I want you to understand how close I came to making the other one. I almost told them. I almost pulled up the Quietwater banking app right there and turned the phone around and let them see the 8 figures and watch their faces collapse. I wanted it so badly my teeth ached. But I looked at my mother, who had laughed at me, who hadn't gotten up to hug her grandson, who was looking at me right now with her mouth set in that thin line that meant she had already decided I was guilty and the explanation didn't matter. She'd decided who I was a long time ago. The truth wasn't going to change that. It was just going to make them want it more. "You really think I stole from you?" I said. It wasn't a question. "The numbers don't lie," my uncle said. "No," I said. "No," I said. "They don't." My aunt was already on her phone. "I'm calling Bradley. He's a sheriff's deputy. He'll know what to do about this." "Mom," I said, ignoring her, looking right at the woman who gave birth to me. "Is that what you think too?" And my mother, on her 60th birthday, in front of 30 people, said, "I think I raised you better than this, and I think I'm ashamed of you." I felt something close in my chest, very quietly, like a door. "Okay," I said. That was all. Just, okay. My stepfather wasn't done. He came across the room toward me, and I'd seen that walk before when I was a teenager, and I instinctively stepped in front of Theo. "You think you can just say okay and walk out of here?" he said. "After what you've done? You're going to sit down and you're going to explain yourself like an adult." "I'm leaving," I said. "Come on, Theo. You're not taking that boy anywhere," my mother said sharply, and that, more than anything, is the moment I remember most clearly. "Not in the state you're in. Theo, come to Grandma." Theo did not move. He gripped my hand tighter. "He's overstimulated," my sister announced to the room in her diagnosing voice. "She drags him everywhere. It's not a stable environment. Honestly, maybe we should be having a different conversation about custody." The word landed in the room and just sat there. My stepfather nodded slowly like she'd handed him a gift. "She's right. A thief raising a child alone. No judge in the county would side with you, Hannah. Maybe Theo stays here with people who can actually provide for him." I have been angry in my life. I had never felt anything like what I felt then. It was very cold and very clear. I picked Theo up, and he wrapped his legs around me and buried his face in my neck, and I walked toward the door, and my stepfather stepped in front of it. "Move," I said. "Or what?" I didn't answer him. I just looked at him. And maybe he saw something in my face he hadn't seen before, because after a long second, he stepped aside. My sister got the last word as I went out the door, because she always has to. "Don't bother coming back, Hannah. You've embarrassed Mom enough for one lifetime." I got Theo buckled into his car seat. My hands had stopped shaking. They were perfectly still. As I pulled out of the driveway, I could see them all spilling out onto the porch behind me. My stepfather pointing, my aunt on the phone, my sister with her arms crossed, all of them so sure they'd won something. My phone was already buzzing in the cuff holder. I waited until we were on the highway, until Theo had drifted off again with his stuffed fox under his chin, before I picked it up at a red light and looked. 3 texts from my uncle. "The bank flagged the account," he wrote. "Don't think you can hide it. We're getting a lawyer." A lawyer. They wanted to get a lawyer. I am not a vindictive person. I want that on the record. For 2 years I had bankrolled the lives of people who treated me like dirt, and I had done it gladly. Because she was my mother and they were my family, and I thought love meant absorbing whatever they threw at me. I had told myself that the money was my way of saying I forgive you for not believing in me. Sitting at that red light, I stopped forgiving them. I called my CFO. Her name was Dolores. She'd been with me 8 years, and she answered on the second ring even though it was a Saturday evening. "Hannah? Everything okay? I need you to do something for me," I said. "The automatic transfers to the account in my mother's name? The holding company disbursements. I want them stopped. Tonight. All of them." There was a pause. "All of them? You're sure? The mortgage too? The property tax escrow? The supplemental account? The one for the medical bills? Everything that touches them? Kill it." "Hannah, the mortgage payment for this month already cleared, but next month?" "Next month they're on their own," I said. "And Dolores, pull the records. Every dollar, going back to the beginning. I want a full accounting on my desk Monday." The light turned green. I drove home. The next morning, I sat at my own kitchen table in my own house, the one my family had never seen because I'd never invited them, the one with the lake out the back windows, and Theo's swing set, and the studio where I still sometimes sewed prototypes by hand because I liked the quiet. I made coffee, and then I started reading what Dolores had sent me overnight. And I have to tell you, even I was not prepared. The total, over 2 years, was just over $640,000. It was all there in a spreadsheet, line by line. The mortgage, of course, the property taxes, but also a $40,000 bass boat my stepfather had bought himself, a series of payments to a country club. My sister's name showed up, which surprised me because I'd never sent money to my sister directly. But there it was. My mother had been quietly forwarding chunks of the money I sent her, the money she thought was a miracle of careful budgeting, to my sister, to help with her kids' private school. The same sister who had taken my homemade cake and hidden it behind the catering because I couldn't afford to do things right. I had paid for those kids' private school. I had paid for the wine in my sister's hand. I had paid for the diamond, probably, if you traced the dollars far enough. And then there was the part that made me put the coffee down. 3 months earlier, there had been a credit application. Someone had used my mother's account information and my name as a reference and a guarantor to apply for a business line of credit. The applicant was listed as my brother-in-law. The business was a real estate flipping venture I had never heard of. He had used my social security number, which my mother had on file from when I'd helped her with her taxes years ago, to vouch for himself. The application had been pending. It was, in plain English, fraud, and it had my name on it. I sat there for a long time looking at that screen while the lake went pink and then gold outside the window. I want to be clear about what happened next because people always assume revenge is loud. It isn't. Real consequences are quiet, and they take a long time, and they come from boring places like banks and law offices and county records. Monday morning, I called my attorney. Not a family lawyer. A corporate one, the woman who'd handled my contracts for years, sharp as a blade and twice as cold. I forwarded her everything. I told her about the fraudulent credit application with my name on it, and I watched through the phone the temperature in her voice drop. "Hannah," she said, "this is identity theft. This is a felony. You understand that?" "I understand. And you want to?" "I want to do everything that's legal," I said. "I want every dollar documented. I want the credit application reported to the bank and to the FTC. I want my name removed from anything it's attached to. And I want it on the record, formally, in writing, that I was the source of those deposits, not a thief stealing them." "That last part's easy," she said. "The holding company records prove it." "Hannah, when this surfaces, your family is going to have a very bad few months. The fraud alone, I know. I'm not telling you to stop. I'm telling you to be ready." I was ready. The first crack showed up about 10 days later. My mother called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. And again. The seventh time I answered, because I'm not made of stone. "Hannah," she said, and her voice was different now, tight and frightened. "The bank called. They said the mortgage didn't go through. They're saying we're behind." "I don't understand. There's always enough. Hannah, what's happening?" "I don't know, Mom," I said quietly. "Maybe ask Uncle. He handles the accounts. He says the deposits stopped, the ones he thought you were." She stopped. The ones he thought I was stealing, I finished for her. Funny how the stealing stopped and now there's no money. Silence on the line. I could hear her breathing. "Mom," I said, "where did you think the money was coming from? Really? Dad's been gone 14 years. You and your husband retired 6 years ago. You bought a boat. You sent the grandkids to private school. On a pension and Social Security. Where did you think it was coming from?" We budgeted. We were careful. You weren't careful. You weren't anything. I was paying for all of it, every month, for 2 years. And on your birthday you stood in front of 30 people and called me a thief and said you were ashamed of me. My voice didn't even rise. That's what scared me a little, how level it stayed. "So no, Mom. I don't know why the mortgage didn't go through. But I'd think very hard about who you were so eager to accuse the next time the money runs out." I hung up. Over the next few weeks, the dominoes I hadn't even pushed started falling on their own. My attorney reported the fraudulent credit application. The bank, it turned out, took identity theft extremely seriously. When the supposed victim showed up with documentation and a lawyer, they froze my brother-in-law's pending line of credit. They flagged the account. And because banks talk to each other and to credit bureaus, his other applications, the ones I knew nothing about, started getting denied too. It turned out the real estate flipping venture was held together with tape and other people's money, and the moment his credit dried up, the whole thing folded. He lost the deposit on a property. Then he lost the property. Then, I heard later, he lost a good deal of my sister's patience. My mother's house went into the early stages of foreclosure proceedings. Not because I did anything to it, simply because the payments I'd been making stopped and they had no way to make them. My stepfather had to sell the bass boat. He sold it at a loss, in a hurry, the way you sell things when you're desperate. The private school sent my sister a letter. Tuition was due. There was no more mystery money flowing from Grandma. Her kids finished out the semester and then they didn't go back. And here is the part I think about most. I didn't gloat. I didn't post anything. I didn't call anyone to crow about it. I just stopped, and the absence of me holding them up was enough to bring the whole thing down. And if you want to know how much weight you were carrying, the only way to find out is to set it down. The family group chat, which I'd been muted in for years, lit up. My aunt sent a message asking if anyone had heard from Hannah's mystery benefactor, not realizing. My uncle, who had handled the accounts, who had spread the papers on the coffee table and pointed at me, went very quiet, because he was the one who was supposed to have caught the fraud, and instead, he'd accused the wrong person. And now, the actual fraud, committed by his nephew-in-law, was on a bank's record and possibly a prosecutor's desk. My sister was the first to call me directly. I almost didn't recognize her voice, it had so little whine in it. "Hannah," she said. "We need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding." "Has there?" The money. We didn't. Nobody actually thought you stole it. Uncle just got confused with the accounts. You know how he is. A pause. Where is it coming from, Hannah? The money? And there it was. Not I'm sorry. Not are you okay. Just, where was the money? Can we turn it back on? It was coming from me, I said. From what do you mean? From you. You can't afford. I own a company called Quietwater, I said. You've probably bought our products. Half the children's hospitals in the country use them. I founded it 11 years ago at the kitchen table, while you were telling everyone I was the family disappointment. Last year we did $58 million. I let that sit. I've been paying Mom's mortgage for 2 years. I paid your kids' tuition. You took my cake and hid it behind your husband's catering and told me I couldn't afford to do things right. So I'm going to ask you to think very carefully, the way I had to think, about the difference between deposits and withdrawals. Because for 2 years, I was the deposit. And you all decided I was the thief. I have never heard my sister go quiet like that. I won't pretend the next year was clean. It wasn't. There were lawyers on their side now too, scrambling. My brother-in-law avoided charges only because the bank decided that recovering its losses was less trouble than a prosecution. But he carries that fraud flag on his credit like a scar, and he and my sister separated within the year, and I had nothing to do with that. That was just two people running out of money to paper over the cracks. My stepfather had a health scare and there was a frantic, ugly attempt by my aunt to guilt me into paying for it, full of phrases like, "She's still your mother," and "blood is blood." And I did, quietly, pay the hospital bill, because I am not interested in becoming them. But I paid it directly to the hospital, and I never told my mother it was me, and I attached no card. Grace, my late father's sister, once told me, is not the same as forgiveness. You can extend the first without ever owing the second. Theo doesn't ask about them much. He was 6, he forgets. Sometimes, though, he'll say something that stops me in the kitchen. A few months after the birthday, he was coloring at the table and he said, not even looking up, "Mommy, those people were mean to you." They were, I said. Are they our family? I thought about it. I thought about the cake hidden behind the catering, and the word custody dropped into the room like a coin into a well, and my mother saying she was ashamed of me while I held her grandson in my arms. We get to choose our family, bud, I said, and I choose you. He nodded like that was obvious, like I'd told him the sky was up, and went back to coloring. My mother and I speak now, a little. She called almost a year after, and she didn't ask for money, which is how I knew something had actually changed. She just said she'd seen Quietwater on a morning show, and that the woman on TV was her daughter, and that she hadn't known. That she was sorry. Not sorry the money stopped. Sorry she laughed when I was 24 and told her I'd started something. Sorry she didn't get up off that armchair to hug my son. I told her I appreciated her saying so. I meant it. And then I told her that I loved her, which was true, and that I wasn't going to be sending money or coming to birthdays for a long time, which was also true, and that both of those things could be real at once. She cried. I let her. And then we hung up, and I went out to the backyard where Theo was on his swing, kicking his small legs at the sky over the lake, and I pushed him until the sun went down, and I did not check my phone once. If you're listening to this and you recognize some part of it, if you're the one in your family who gets the jokes made at your expense, who pays and gets called a failure for it, I want you to hear one thing. The money never bought their respect. It bought their comfort, and they mistook the two, and so did I. You are allowed to set the weight down. You are allowed to find out what was never love. And you are allowed to walk out the door with your child on your hip and your own life waiting on the other side of it, quiet and whole and entirely, finally, yours. For 2 years I mistook silence for love. I sent that money every month and told myself it was forgiveness wearing a quieter coat, and the truth is I was just afraid. Afraid that if I stopped paying, there would be nothing underneath holding us together, and I would have to look at that emptiness directly. So I kept the deposits coming and I kept my mouth shut, and the longer I did it, the easier it became for everyone to believe I was exactly what they said I was. That is the first thing I understand now. Cause and effect don't care about your intentions. I taught them I was a bottomless account, so they treated me like one. I taught them my voice didn't matter, so they stopped listening for it. What broke the cycle wasn't the money I had. It was finally deciding to do the right thing in the right order. Paying my stepfather's hospital bill directly, with no card attached, and never letting my mother know it was me, that was harder than canceling everything had been, because it meant choosing who I wanted to be instead of who they'd turned me into. Anyone can write a check out of guilt. It takes a steadier kind of decency to give without expecting it to fix anything, and to hold a boundary without turning cruel. That balance, between an open hand and a closed door, is the thing I'm proudest of, more than the 58 million, more than the warehouse, more than any of it. I also had to get smarter about people, and that lesson cost me. For years, I read my mother's coldness as something I could melt with enough effort, enough money, enough proof. I was wrong about what the situation actually was, and being wrong wasn't innocent. It was expensive. The day I sat at my kitchen table and finally read the spreadsheet for what it was, the fraud with my name on it, the tuition I'd unknowingly funded, the boat, I stopped seeing them the way I wished they were, and started seeing them the way I wished they were, and started seeing them the way they'd shown me they were, over and over, while I refused to look. Clear eyes aren't a gift you're born with. They're something you earn by being willing to be disappointed by the truth. And the strength part, the part people think is dramatic, was actually the quietest moment of my whole life. It was one word at my mother's birthday. Okay. It was picking up Thiel and walking past my stepfather without raising my voice. Real resolve almost never looks like a speech. It looks like a tired woman buckling a car seat with steady hands and driving home and making one phone call. If you take anything from what happened to me, let it be this. You can love people and still refuse to be their fuel. You can build something extraordinary and never owe anyone an explanation for it. Set the weight down, find out what was never love, and go live the